Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our Chats with Emily. That's what we're calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson contained in the Johnson edition. We are at poem 202 of the 1,775 poems. My eye is fuller than my vase. We're back to another poem about longing, about despair. Of course, it's going to be a poem about tears, about weeping. And it is true that often people have assumed that Emily's poetry is just always lugubrious and mournful and sad. We've already shown that no, that's not the case at all now that we're 200 poems plus into our study together. Now our assumptions are that you have been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, our playlist is again Chats with Emily. I'm hopeful that you've already been exposed to our set of introductory comments. I'm really hopeful that you've already worked through the preceding 201 poems, so that now as we come, we just finished with poem 201, Two Swimmers Wrestled. Now as we come to this poem, this little brief little offering, we're back to Emily, we're back to tears, we're back to crying. In some ways, I think Emily's very influenced in her reading of the book of Psalms in the Bible. Psalms like Psalm 13, how long wilt thou forget me, O Lord, forever? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? This idea of crying, we saw the word beseeching in the last poem. We're back as well to not getting the thing that one longs for. Here, the geography will even be referenced as East India, for the only time she'll reference it in her poem. She referenced it once in a letter. The place in the world where one will never ever be able to go. She says it this way: my eye is fuller than my vase. Her cargo is of dew, and still my heart, my eye outweighs East India for you. Again, notice the uses of the dash, which creates a certain difficulty in reading this poem. And of course, we have a little bit of grammar syntax game that she's playing, and we've seen this already. Of course, this idea of my eye, it's a very popular formulation for her, is fuller than my vase, is a creative way, of course, to say, my eyes are full of tears. Her cargo, that is to say, the vase's cargo, what's inside the vase, is of dew. Now, guys, I have said to you that I think Emily's playing so many games, and I think she's having a blast of a time. One of the reasons that I love to call these lectures Chats with Emily is it would be so much fun to sit down and ask her, hey, when you used this phrase of dew, were you playing around with the potentiality that the word adieu, and of course, she would be so familiar with it from her study of Hamlet. That's what you'll remember the ghost of the father says to young man Hamlet. Adieu meaning, of course, goodbye. Here it's do. And go back to Hamlet. We've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. And the way in which do gets used even in that play. Her cargo is of dew. In other words, water, right? In other words, the vase is filled up with water, but I have more water filled up in my eyes. That is to say, I'm really weeping here. And still, we commented already in a number of different poems about Emily's use of the word still. It was there as well in poem 201. I've argued that T.S. Eliot learned to use the word still. Go back to our lectures on four quartets to see what I mean. We must be still and still moving, for example. And still, she says, my heart, notice capitalized, and still my heart, my eye outweighs. Now, it's this interesting kind of formulation. In other words, I have more sadness, more tears in my heart than I even do in my eye. In other words, I feel more profoundly sad than I'm even showing with the tears in my eyes. My eye outweighs East India, in other words, the unobtainable, the thing I'll never be able to get to, as in East India. And then finally, the uncertain for you. And again, some have said this is about Sam, some have, Sam Boyle, some have said this is about Sue. I'm interested in her use of the word outweighs, because I think here, by the way, this is the only time she uses that word in all of her poems. I think that what game she's playing here takes us back to, and takes her back to her reading of the Iliad. You'll remember, guys, that when we did at learnstrong.net, we did lectures over all of the different books of the Iliad. Do you remember the famous scales of Zeus in Iliad 23, where justice is weighed out, right? You'll remember this game that's being played. In other words, there's this there's this attempt to try to create some kind of equilibrated state, and it is not working out for Emily at all. And in that regards, now we can come to 2a. What exactly is she saying here? I think that her argument is simple. Sometimes the only thing to do is weep. Sometimes you have to accept the fact you're not going to get the thing you really, really want. Of course, you at the end of the poem makes us wonder, who is it she's actually referencing? By the way, some have read this, as I quoted Psalm 13, some have read this that Emily is in fact channeling the psalmist, and probably in the case of Psalm 13, David. That is to say, that longing, how long wilt thou forget me, O Lord? Like that longing for you. Some have read this poem that way. That is to say, a longing for connection with deity. It can be read that way, surely. At 2b, well, I love her word choice. For example, her use of outweighs, and that takes us to 3a. I think that Iliad 23 is, in some regards, standing behind her use of the word outweigh. You'll remember it from Iliad 23, 109 to 213. As I said, we've given full lectures at learnstrong.net. What about her biblical referencing here? And maybe, for example, that famous shortest verse of the Bible in John 11:35, Jesus wept. And of course, what did Jesus weep for? The loss of his pal Lazarus, right? Finally, at 3b, what was a time to connect with a poem like this? What was a time when you did feel like this? When your eyes were fuller than any vase filled with water, and your heart was even more unsettled than your eyes were. What was a time that you felt like this? A time when maybe you wept and you had to get through it to get to the other side. Thank you.